The $80,000 Mercedes sat in my driveway, ribbon blazing red under the frost. From the kitchen window, I watched Daniel press the keys into Vivian's palm. His smile wide, hers wider. "Merry Christmas, Mom," Daniel said to Vivian. My son calling another woman Mom. On my counter sat my gift, a $5 card in a novelty mug. I didn't speak, just swallowed the crack in my chest. That red ribbon was only the beginning. The real betrayal waited just beyond my own walls. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The Mercedes gleamed like fresh blood against dirty snow. I watched from my kitchen window. Daniel held out the key fob like he was crowning a queen. Megan, my daughter-in-law, clapped her hands. The children jumped up and down. Vivian Cole took those keys with a smile that claimed everything it touched. My son called this woman Mom. The word floated across my driveway. It never came my way. Not anymore. I turned back to my counter. My Christmas gift sat there. A novelty mug that said "Savers Gonna Save." Inside, a $5 coffee card. I had spent 3 days cooking for them. Prime rib, homemade rolls, sweet potato casserole the way Richard used to love, apple pie with a lattice crust that took 2 hours to weave. The smell of cinnamon still hung in my kitchen. But they barely touched the food. Vivian floated through my house like she owned it. Her perfume was expensive, sharp. It clung to my curtains long after she passed through. Her silver hair was perfect. Not a strand out of place. She called Daniel her rock. She called Megan her girl. Her voice was honey over steel. It smoothed every rough edge. It claimed every corner of my home. The children followed her like moths to flame. She sparkled. I faded. When dinner ended, I cleared plates alone. I scraped food into the garbage. Food I had made with love. Food that went cold while they admired chrome and leather outside. The dishwasher hummed. The grandfather clock ticked. Richard used to wind that clock every Sunday. Now I did it alone. They left to show off the car around town. The house fell silent, empty as a held breath. That was when I saw it. Vivian's leather folio on my sideboard. Left behind in her rush to parade my son's gift. I told myself I was being helpful. Just securing her belongings. My hands shook as I lifted the flap. Inside, bank statements with commas that made my eyes widen. A thick planner filled with appointments. Envelopes marked private in block letters. But tucked behind a gold pen were photocopies. Public records. My name highlighted in yellow. Property searches. Pension benefit summaries. A list of county offices. I set everything down. Picked it up again. The clock kept ticking. My heart hammered against my ribs. These were not casual papers. Someone had been researching me. Someone had been planning. I found more. Cash in crisp hundreds. 3 credit cards in different names. A page labeled Key Contacts. One line read Notary Mobile. Another title Consultant. A tabbed section said Opportunities. Inside, glossy brochures about sale-leaseback options for seniors. The words promised freedom. The fine print promised rent payments. Forever. Another tab held a checklist in Vivian's neat handwriting. Box 1 Gain Trust Holidays. Checked. Box 2 Access Documents, Photos. Checked. Box 3 Third-party validation. Not yet checked. My mouth went dry. I was looking at a hunting manual. And I was the prey. A smaller envelope held printouts from my county clerk's office. Someone had searched my parcel number. Someone had pulled my property value. Someone had mapped my assets like a treasure hunter. The phone rang. Sharp. Sudden. I nearly dropped the papers. Officer Reeves introduced himself. He was following up on a concern from Andrew Cole about his mother's whereabouts. Vivian's son was looking for her. I told him she had left with family. She had a new car. My voice stayed steady, but my hands trembled as I hung up. When they returned, Vivian performed surprise at her forgetfulness. Silly me. She laughed. She checked the folio without looking obvious. Her fingers counted papers, counted cash, counted secrets. Daniel kissed her temple, like she was his real mother. Like I was just the woman who raised him. Megan suggested they turn in early. Long day tomorrow, she said. No one asked if I wanted to ride in the luxury car. The car I could never afford. The car bought with money they did not have. They climbed the stairs to the guest room. The room that used to be Daniel's. Where I had tucked him in for 18 years. Where I had read him stories and chased away nightmares. Now another woman slept there. Another woman had taken my place. I sat in Richard's recliner. The leather was worn smooth by his body. By our 43 years together. I turned the coffee card over in my hands. $5. The number felt small, sharp, like a paper cut. I opened my laptop, typed Vivian Cole into the search bar. Then stopped. I did not need the internet yet. I needed something else. I needed a plan. I walked to Richard's old desk. Pulled out a yellow legal pad. Found a pen that did not skip. The kind Richard used for important papers. At the top of the page, I wrote 3 columns. What they know. What they want. What I control. Under the last column, I wrote my signature. My voice. My records. My patience. Then I added one more word, recordings. I picked up my phone. Found the voice recording app. Tested it. The red dot blinked. Ready. I slid the phone into my cardigan pocket. The pocket closest to my heart. Tomorrow they would come back. They would bring papers. They would bring pressure. They would bring lies wrapped in kindness. But I would be ready. I had raised a son. I had buried a husband. I had worked 40 years as a nurse. I had seen every kind of human weakness. I had also seen every kind of human strength. The clock chimed midnight. Christmas was over. The real work was about to begin. I sat back in Richard's chair. Closed my eyes. Felt his presence in the worn leather. In the steady tick of time. They thought I was just an old woman. Alone. Confused. Easy to fool. They were wrong. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Morning came gray and cold. I woke in Richard's chair. My neck ached. The yellow pad had fallen to the floor. I made coffee. Strong. Black. The way Richard used to drink it. The smell filled my kitchen. Filled the empty spaces. I called my attorney. Nora Bennett had shepherded our wills for 20 years. Her voice was sharp. Professional. Walk me through your files, I said. Especially anything granting Daniel authority. Her paws stretched like a held breath. We never executed a power of attorney after Richard passed, she said. Your choice. My blood went cold. But someone had filed papers. Someone had used my name. I dressed carefully. Gray wool coat. Sensible shoes. The clothes of a woman who meant business. Not the clothes of a victim. The county office smelled like old paper and fluorescent lights. The clerk was young. Bored. I asked for recent filings under my name. She typed. Clicked. Frowned. Here, she said. A durable power of attorney. Recorded 2 weeks ago. The screen showed my name. my address, my birth date, a signature that was almost mine. Almost, but not quite. I do not loop my R that way. I never have, never will. The notary seal was fresh, clean, professional looking. Filed by Daniel Hart, the notes read. My own son's name, used like a weapon. I asked for a copy. Paid the fee. Walked to my car on legs that barely held me. The parking lot was full of ordinary people, living ordinary lives, not knowing their children might sell them, not knowing trust could have a price tag. I sat in my car, studied the forged signature. Someone had practiced, someone had prepared, someone had planned this theft with the care of a surgeon. But they had made one mistake. They thought I would not look, would not check, would not fight. Back home, I walked through each room, seeing it with new eyes. Vivian had positioned herself like a chess master. Every question had been strategy. Every compliment had been calculation. She had asked to help with doctor visits, to review my medications, to understand my beautiful equity. The words had sounded kind. Now they sounded like hunting calls. I remembered Daniel repeating new words. Restructure, leverage, yield. Words that did not belong in his mouth. Words someone else had planted there. Megan had nodded along. Tired from job hunting, scared about money. They wanted easy answers. Vivian offered easy answers with expensive prices. I brewed fresh coffee, sat at my kitchen table, pulled out the yellow pad, drew 3 new columns: what they know, what they want, what I control. Under the first, my assets, my routines, my loneliness. Under the second, my house, my money, my signature on papers. Under the third, my voice, my records, my patience, my anger. Then I wrote one more word. Recordings. I found my phone, tested the recording app again. The red dot blinked, ready to catch lies, ready to catch thieves. The doorbell rang. 3 sharp chimes. I checked the window. Daniel's car in my driveway. Megan beside him, both looking nervous. I opened the door, let them in, made more coffee, set out cookies I had baked yesterday. Before I knew they were coming to rob me. They carried a folder, thick with papers, important-looking documents with official seals. Vivian had resources, Daniel said. Charts with arrows, comfort words in pretty fonts. I listened to their pitch. Reverse mortgages, sale-leaseback agreements, financial freedom for seniors, all the buzzwords that meant one thing: give us everything. Daniel spoke quickly, avoided my eyes. His foot tapped against the table leg. Megan watched him like he might break. I asked simple questions, the kind any smart woman would ask. How much money? Which bank? Who holds the deed? What happens if I get sick? Their answers were vague, soft, full of trust us phrases and don't worry gestures. But I was past trust, past worry. I was into planning. Are you in trouble? I asked. The question hung in my kitchen like smoke. Daniel stared at his hands. It's complicated, he said. Complications have shapes. I waited. Let the silence stretch. Let it pull truth from hiding. He sat back, rubbed his face. We're late on the second mortgage, he said. Megan lost her job in June. The car was part of showing commitment. The word commitment had never cost $80,000 before. Not in my house. Not in my family. He talked then about debt stacked like firewood. Credit cards. A ballooning home equity loan. School payments that would not wait. Bills that grew in the dark like mushrooms. Vivian had found them right as the water reached their necks. She was the rope in the flood. Her rope wanted collateral, signatures, trust. I asked about his promotion. The one he had mentioned at Thanksgiving. His face went blank. False, I realized. Another lie in a growing pile. I asked about the power of attorney. The one filed in my name. Without my knowledge. Without my permission. His face emptied completely. I didn't file anything, he said. Surprise cracked his voice like an egg. I believed him, which meant Vivian had moved the pieces while we all slept. Megan spoke then, careful as stepping on ice. Vivian had shown testimonials, glowing outcomes, success stories without names or details. Vivian had warned them about older people. About how we freeze, how we miss opportunities, how we cling to old ways that no longer work. I wrote down every phrase, every sales pitch, every manipulation technique. I had heard them all before. In hospital corridors, from medical equipment salespeople, from pharmaceutical reps with rolling briefcases and empty promises. The pattern was always the same. Find the vulnerable, offer hope, take everything. But I was not vulnerable. Not anymore. I was angry. And anger, properly focused, could cut through lies like sunlight through fog. I told them my terms. We would act interested. We would ask for more details. We would bring Vivian into the open. We would let her talk until she said too much. Daniel swallowed hard. Megan nodded slowly. They were scared. Ashamed, desperate, but they were still my family. Still worth saving, even from themselves. I pressed record with my thumb. Smiled the way women do when rooms underestimate them. When predators mistake patience for weakness. The hunt was about to begin. This time, I would not be the prey. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The next morning brought ice on my windows. Thin sheets that caught the pale sun. I scraped frost with my fingernails. Watched it fall in sharp pieces. My phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. Hope you're considering our conversation yesterday. Smiley face emoji. Heart emoji. Digital sweetness that made my stomach turn. I typed back slowly. Very interested. Can we meet today? Send. Her reply came instantly. Of course. Might treat. The cafe on Maple Street. 11:30. I set the phone down. Checked my recording app. Charged the battery to full. Slipped it into my coat pocket. The cafe smelled like burned coffee and stale pastry. Vivian had chosen a corner table. Back to the wall. Eyes on the door. A predator's position. She wore cream wool. Gold jewelry that caught the light. Her smile was warm. Professional. The kind that sold insurance and cemetery plots. She praised Daniel's initiative. Megan's bravery. Words that sounded generous. Felt calculated. Then she turned to me with softer eyes. She painted a future that glowed. Liquidate your assets. Lease back your home. Watch your money grow. You'll stay right where you are, she said. Just the smart way. The smart way. As if I had been living the stupid way for 70 years. I asked ordinary questions, the kind any careful woman would ask. Who owns these companies? Which bank holds the funds? What happens if property values fall? Vivian smoothed every rough edge. Her partners were selective, she said. They valued discretion, privacy, the kind of service regular banks couldn't provide. She mentioned timing. Good windows close quickly. Opportunities don't wait. The usual pressure tactics wrapped in concern. I watched the hunger behind her politeness. It flickered when I mentioned my accounts. When I hinted at numbers larger than she had assumed, I slid a manila envelope from my purse. Financial statements I had crafted with Nora's help. Bank balances impressive enough to make a con artist's pulse quicken. Projected annuity payouts that would change a thief's timeline. Investment accounts that would rearrange a criminal's priorities. Vivian's breathing changed, shortened. Her pen hovered over the papers like a hawk over a field mouse. She began suggesting international vehicles, tax efficiency strategies, offshore opportunities that regular advisors never mentioned. Each suggestion stepped further from legal ground. Each idea moved deeper into fraud territory. My phone caught every word. I asked about her partners. The ones too busy for yesterday's meeting. She said they were based in Delaware. Corporate privacy laws, she explained. Better for everyone. Delaware, the incorporation capital of America, where shell companies bred like roaches in dark kitchens. I requested full company names, legal entity numbers, the basic information any real investor would demand. She offered initials, abbreviations, process over substance, trust over verification. I asked who held the deed during transition periods. She spoke of managed trusts, associate oversight, bureaucratic fog that hid simple theft. I let silence sit between us. Salespeople hate silence. It makes them fill Kong Bai with truth. She mentioned staging funds, temporary overseas accounts, strategies to optimize tax windows before year-end. Every phrase was a confession. Every explanation was evidence. My phone recorded it all. Back home, I spread the morning's harvest across my kitchen table. Notes, recorded conversations, photocopies of corporate filings Nora had pulled. The shell company Vivian mentioned appeared in 3 fraud investigations. 2 in Florida, 1 in Arizona. Same pattern every time. Target elderly homeowners. Gain family trust. File false documents. Transfer assets. Disappear. But they had made a mistake with me. They had assumed I was lonely. Confused. Desperate for family approval. I was lonely. That part was true. The house echoed with 43 years of marriage. With decades of raising children. With memories that had no one left to share them. But lonely did not mean stupid. Grief did not mean gullible. I called Nora. Told her about the morning's meeting. The recorded admissions. The pattern we were building. She listened without interruption. Professional silence that meant she was taking notes. Building cases. Preparing weapons. This is enough for a police report, she said finally. Detective work comes next. I asked about Daniel. About criminal liability for family members. About how far the law could reach. He filed nothing, she reminded me. The forgery was Vivian's work. He was a victim too. Foolish, maybe. Desperate, certainly. But not criminal. That afternoon, Daniel and Megan returned. They carried fresh folders. New proposals. Vivian had been busy. They looked tired. Worried. The kind of exhaustion that comes from drowning in slow motion. I made tea. Set out shortbread cookies. Played the concerned mother. The role I had been practicing for 35 years. Daniel explained Vivian's latest offer. A full portfolio consolidation. Everything moved to high-yield international funds. Returns that sounded magical. Magic always costs more than it promises. I asked to meet these mysterious partners. To see the Delaware offices. To verify the legitimacy Vivian claimed. Daniel shifted in his chair. Megan stared at her hands. They knew something was wrong. But they were too scared to name it. Vivian called while they sat in my living room. Her voice carried through Daniel's phone. Bright. Urgent. The partners could meet Friday. A rare opening in their schedules. Friday was 3 days away. Rush timing meant desperate timing. Pressure meant mistakes waiting to happen. I accepted immediately. Sounded eager. Grateful for the opportunity. After they left, I sat in Richard's chair. Thought about patterns. About predators and prey. About the difference between being hunted and being bait. Vivian thought she was closing a trap. Moving pieces toward checkmate. But chess required seeing all the players. She had missed the most important piece on the board. The one that looked weak. Defenseless. Easy to capture. The one that had been planning her own game all along. I opened my laptop, researched Delaware corporate law, studied fraud prosecution patterns, learned the language of evidence and conviction. Knowledge was ammunition. Patience was strategy. Anger was fuel. Friday would come. Vivian would perform. The partners would make their pitch. And I would be ready. Recording. Remembering. Reckoning. The hunt was almost over. Time to set the final trap. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Thursday came wrapped in fog. Thick gray that swallowed the streetlights. Made the world smaller. Quieter. I woke before dawn. Made coffee in the dark. Sat at my kitchen table with Richard's old reading lamp. The yellow circle of light felt safe. Contained. My phone showed 3 missed calls. All from Vivian. No messages. Just the hunger of someone who couldn't wait. I called her back at 7 sharp. Her voice was bright. Too bright for early morning. She asked if I was excited about tomorrow's meeting. Excited. As if signing away my life's work was Christmas morning. Yes, I told her. Very excited. Looking forward to meeting the team. She talked about preparation. Documents I should bring. Questions I should ask. The script she wanted me to follow. But I had my own script now. Written in careful handwriting. Memorized like a prayer. After breakfast, I drove to the bank. Spoke with my account manager. A young man who called me Mrs. Hart. Who treated my money with proper respect. I moved funds between accounts. Created the paper trail Vivian would expect to see. Made my assets look more liquid. More tempting. The manager offered investment advice. Municipal bonds. Conservative portfolios for someone my age. I thanked him. Did not mention that age also brought cunning. Experience. The ability to smell lies from across a room. Back home, I prepared my bait. Bank statements showing recent transfers. Investment summaries that told the story Vivian wanted to hear. A widow with substantial assets. No close family oversight. Trusting. Vulnerable. Ready to be harvested. I practiced my questions. The innocent ones that would make her talk. The curious ones that would make her explain. My phone rang at noon. Daniel. His voice was tight. Strained like a rope under too much weight. Vivian wants us to come early tomorrow, he said. Before the meeting. To review the paperwork. Of course she did. Predators liked controlled environments. Witnesses they could manage. What time? I asked. 9:30. At her house. The meeting starts at 11. I wrote it down. Added it to my timeline. My phone would be charged. My recorder ready. That afternoon, Megan stopped by alone. No Daniel. No children. Just a tired woman carrying too much weight. She sat at my kitchen table. Accepted coffee but didn't drink it. Stared at the steam rising from her cup. I'm scared, she said finally. The words hung between us like smoke. Truth often does that. Makes the air heavy. Of what? I asked, though I already knew. Of losing everything, she said. Of Daniel's choices. Of what we've already lost. I reached across the table. Covered her hand with mine. Her fingers were cold, trembling like bird wings. What would you do? She asked. If you were me? I considered lying, offering comfort instead of truth. But comfort wouldn't save her family. I would trust my instincts, I said. They're usually right. She nodded, squeezed my hand, left without drinking her coffee. The cup sat on my table for an hour, growing cold, like everything Vivian touched. That evening, I called Nora. Gave her the timeline for tomorrow. The location. The participants. She had been busy. Contacted the state attorney general's office. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Built a network of interested parties. Tomorrow would not be just a meeting. It would be a performance. With a larger audience than Vivian imagined. I also called Detective Reeves, the officer who had investigated Vivian's disappearance report. He listened without interruption. Professional silence that meant he was paying attention. He would be nearby tomorrow. Close enough to respond quickly. Far enough away to avoid spooking the prey. After dinner, I sat in Richard's chair. Closed my eyes. Felt his presence in the worn leather. What would you do? I asked the empty room. The answer came in his voice. The one that lived in my memory. Fight, Eleanor. Fight like hell. I opened the yellow legal pad. Reviewed my notes. My questions. My timeline for tomorrow's trap. At the top of a fresh page, I wrote, evidence needed. Below that, admission of fraud. False documents. Criminal intent. Conspiracy. Then I wrote witnesses present. And finally, recording quality verified. My phone sat charging on the side table. Battery at 100%. Memory cleared. Ready to catch thieves in their own words. I tried on tomorrow's costume. Gray wool dress. Conservative jewelry. The look of a trusting widow with substantial assets. In the mirror, I practiced expressions. Confusion. Gratitude. Innocent questions wrapped in grandmotherly smiles. The performance would be my best work. 40 years of nursing had taught me to read people. To project exactly what they expected to see. Tomorrow, they would see a helpless old woman. Lonely. Desperate for approval. Easy money wrapped in wrinkled skin. They would be wrong. But they wouldn't know that until too late. I set my alarm for 6. Early enough to prepare. Late enough to sleep. But sleep didn't come easily. My mind raced through scenarios. Contingencies. Things that could go wrong. What if Vivian suspected? What if the recording failed? What if Daniel got hurt in the crossfire? I pushed the fears away. Focused on facts. Evidence. The case we were building. At midnight, I finally dozed. Dreamed of red ribbons and forged signatures. Of Mercedes in driveways and $5 cards. But also of justice. Of truth spoken in courtrooms. Of predators in orange jumpsuits. Morning would come soon. The final act would begin. Vivian thought she was directing this play. Moving actors across her stage. Controlling the script. She had forgotten something important. Something every nurse learns early. The quiet ones are often the most dangerous. The ones who watch. Who listen. Who remember everything. Tomorrow, I would remind her of that lesson. In ways she would never forget. The trap was set. The bait was ready. The hunters were in position. Time to catch a thief. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Friday morning arrived clear and cold. Sharp air that cut through everything soft. I woke at 5:30. No alarm needed. My body knew. I dressed carefully. Gray wool dress. Pearl earrings Richard gave me for our 10th anniversary. Low heels that wouldn't slip on ice. The costume of a trusting widow. Vulnerable. Wealthy. Ready to be fleeced. In the kitchen, I made oatmeal. Added brown sugar and cinnamon. Comfort food for what wouldn't be comfortable. My hands were steady. My pulse was calm. 40 years of nursing had taught me this. How to be steady when others shook. At 8:30, Daniel arrived alone. Megan had stayed home with the children. Smart woman. Some things shouldn't have witnesses. He looked tired, worried, like a man walking toward a cliff in fog. Ready? He asked. I nodded, picked up my purse, the one with my phone tucked inside. Recording app already running. Vivian's house smelled like expensive candles and desperation. White lilies everywhere, the smell of funerals dressed up as celebrations. She had staged the living room for persuasion. Glossy folders on the coffee table. Crystal water glasses. Fresh flowers in tall vases. Her partners hadn't arrived yet. Emergency conference call, she explained. They would join us at 11. Of course. Predators like to work alone first. Test the waters. Find the soft spots. She spread documents across the marble table. Contracts thick with terms I was supposed to trust. Numbers that looked impressive until you read the fine print. I asked for company names. Full legal entities. The kind of details real investors demanded. She offered abbreviations. Shell company initials. Delaware incorporations that meant nothing and everything. I pressed harder. Who holds my deed during transition? What happens if property values fall? Who pays if the investments fail? Her answers got vaguer, softer, more trust us and less show you. Daniel sat beside me, fidgeting. His foot tapped against the marble floor. He knew something was wrong. But fear made him quiet. I opened my purse, pulled out my bait. Bank statements showing recent moves. Large sums sitting in accessible accounts. Vivian's breathing changed, quickened. Her pupils dilated like a cat seeing a mouse. She began talking faster. About international opportunities. Offshore vehicles, tax strategies that skirted legal edges. Each word was evidence. Each suggestion was confession. My phone caught it all. I mentioned consolidating everything, moving my full portfolio to their management. The kind of total commitment that made criminals salivate. She leaned forward, eyes bright with hunger. We can protect all of it, she said. Make it grow. Make it work for you. The words were honey over poison. Sweet promises hiding bitter theft. At 10:45, she made a show of calling her partners. Spoke to someone who might have been real. Might have been her own voicemail. They were running late, she announced. Traffic from the airport. International connections were complicated. More delay. More pressure. More time to wear down resistance. But I wasn't resisting. I was hunting. I asked about the power of attorney. The one filed in my name. Without my signature. Her face went blank for a half second. Then the smile returned. Brighter. Sharper. That was for efficiency, she said. To streamline the process. Save time on paperwork. Fraud dressed up as convenience. Theft marketed as service. I nodded like a confused grandmother. Asked innocent questions that weren't innocent at all. What other documents had been filed? What other signatures had been streamlined? What other efficiencies had been arranged? Each question made her talk more. Explain more. Confess more. Daniel shifted beside me. His face was pale. He was beginning to understand. At 11:15, Vivian's phone rang. Her partner's again. More delays. More complications. I suggested we proceed without them. Move forward with what we had. Strike while opportunity was hot. She loved that idea. Started pulling out signature pages. Places for me to commit. To surrender. To sign away everything I owned. I studied each page. Asked about clauses. Terms. Conditions. The kind of careful reading that makes criminals nervous. Then I did something unexpected. I started to sign. My pen moved across the first page. Eleanor Hart in careful script. The signature of someone who trusted. Vivian watched like a hawk over prey. Hungry. Focused. Ready to strike. But I stopped. Pen hovering over the second page. I need to call my attorney first, I said. Just to make sure. Her face flickered. Annoyance behind politeness. Frustration wrapped in understanding. Of course, she said. Though these opportunities don't wait forever. Pressure. Always pressure. The universal tool of every con artist. I dialed Nora's number. Put it on speaker so Daniel could hear. Nora's voice was crisp. Professional. She asked about entity verification. Regulatory compliance. Due diligence requirements. Questions that made Vivian's jaw tighten. Her smile strain. I hung up. Looked apologetic. My attorney wants to review everything first, I said. Vivian's mask slipped. Just for a moment. Long enough to show the predator underneath. Then it was back. Smooth. Professional. Understanding wrapped around impatience. She suggested we reschedule. Early next week. Before tax deadlines created complications. More pressure. More urgency. More reasons not to think. But thinking was exactly what I had been doing. For days. For hours. For every moment since Christmas morning. I gathered my papers. My purse. My evidence. Daniel walked me to the car. His hands shook as he opened my door. Mom, he started. Then stopped. The word hung between us like a bridge half built. I know, I said. We'll fix this. Back home, I called Detective Reeves immediately. Gave him everything. Recordings. Observations. Timeline. His voice was satisfied. Professional pleasure at a case coming together. We have enough, he said. More than enough. I also called Nora. Played her the morning's recordings. Her silence was approval. Monday, she said. We move on Monday. But I had one more call to make. One more piece to position. I dialed Vivian's number. Let it ring twice before answering. I've been thinking about our conversation, I said. About moving forward quickly. Her voice brightened. Eager. Hungry. Can we meet this weekend? I asked. I'm ready to proceed. The trap was closing. The prey was circling. The hunt was almost over. Time to finish what Christmas morning had started. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Saturday morning came gray and heavy. Snow threatened in the low clouds. The kind of weather that made everything feel final. I woke early. Made strong coffee. Sat at Richard's desk with my yellow legal pad. Wrote the day's objectives in careful script. Obtain full confession. Document criminal intent. Protect Daniel from prosecution. Simple goals. Clear targets. The kind of plan that left no room for mercy. Vivian called at 8 sharp. Her voice was sugar and steel. She had arranged everything for today. Her home. Privacy. Complete access to signed documents. Perfect, I told her. I'm ready to move forward. She suggested 2 o'clock. Plenty of time for final preparations. For last chances to back out. But backing out wasn't on my list. Not anymore. I spent the morning rehearsing. Practiced confused questions and grateful smiles. The performance of someone too trusting to live. At 1:30, I drove to Vivian's house. The same route as yesterday. But today felt different, sharper, like walking toward an execution. She greeted me at the door. Cream silk blouse, gold jewelry that caught the weak sunlight. The costume of success built on others' losses. Her living room had been reset. More documents, fresh flowers, water glasses filled with ice that wouldn't last the hour. We sat across from each other. Predator and prey, or what she thought was prey. I opened my purse, checked my phone discreetly. Recording app running, battery full, memory cleared for whatever came next. She began with pleasantries. How well I looked. How smart this decision was. How proud Richard would be. Richard's name in her mouth felt like blasphemy. But I smiled, nodded, played my part. Then she got to business. The real reason we were here. She spread new papers across the table. Signature pages mostly. Places for me to surrender everything I owned. But these documents were different. Cleaner. More official looking. The kind that might fool a bank. Might fool a court. I studied each page. Asked about terms. Clauses. The small print that hid large theft. She explained with practiced patience. How my assets would be protected. Managed. Grown beyond my simple expectations. Each explanation was a confession. Each promise was evidence. My phone caught every word. I asked about the timeline. When funds would transfer. When I would lose control. She said it would happen quickly. Efficiently. Before I could change my mind or ask too many questions. Speed was always the con artist's friend. Confusion was their tool. Pressure was their weapon. But I wasn't confused. Wasn't pressured. I was hunting. I mentioned my substantial IRA funds. The ones I hadn't discussed before. Numbers that made her pupils dilate. She leaned forward, breathing faster. The scent of expensive perfume couldn't hide the smell of greed. We can handle those too, she said. Move everything under one umbrella. One management structure. Total control. Complete access. Everything a thief could want. I nodded thoughtfully. Pulled out my checkbook. The big one for major transactions. Her eyes followed my hands. Watched me write figures. Amounts. The kind of money that changed criminal timelines. Then I did something that surprised her. I stood up. I need to use your restroom, I said. All this excitement. She pointed down the hall. Second door on the right. In her bathroom, I checked my phone. 40 minutes of recorded confession. Enough to put her away for years. But I wanted more. Needed more. Insurance against lawyers and technicalities. I returned to the living room. Sat down with grandmother concern. I'm worried about one thing, I said. What if someone questions these transfers? She assured me that wouldn't happen. The structure was foolproof. The documentation was perfect. But what if it did? What if authorities asked questions? Her face changed, hardened just slightly, enough to show the steel beneath silk. They won't, she said. These transactions are private, confidential, protected. I pressed harder. But what if someone had filed false documents? Forged signatures? What then? The silence stretched between us. Thick as fog, heavy as guilt. She recovered quickly, smiled that practiced smile. Those things don't happen with professionals, she said. But they had happened. We both knew it. The power of attorney, the forged signature, the stolen identity. I decided to take the final step. The one that would end this charade. I opened my purse again. This time, I pulled out a copy of the forged document. The power of attorney filed in my name. I set it on the table between us. Let her see her own crime in black and white. Her face went blank, then pale, then something harder than either. Where did you get that? She asked. Public records, I said. Amazing what you can find when you look. She stared at the document. At the signature that was mine but wasn't. At the evidence of her own greed. I know what you've been doing, I said quietly. Who you really are. What you planned for me. Her mask finally fell away. The silk and smiles disappeared. What remained was sharp, desperate, dangerous. You can't prove anything, she said. But I already had. 45 minutes of recorded confession. Documents. Evidence. A case built piece by careful piece. My phone sat in my purse. Still recording. Still gathering proof. I stood up slowly. Picked up my things. Left the forged document on her table. I think we're done here, I said. She watched me move toward the door. Her face was stone. Her eyes were calculation. This isn't over, she said. But it was. Had been since Christmas morning. Since the $5 card and the red ribbon. Since the moment she mistook loneliness for weakness. I drove home through streets that felt cleaner. Brighter. Like someone had washed the windows of the world. At home, I called Detective Reeves immediately. Told him about the afternoon. The confession. The evidence. His voice was satisfied. We'll pick her up tomorrow, he said. I also called Nora. Played her the recordings. Her silence was professional approval. Monday we file everything, she said. Criminal charges. Civil recovery. The full package. That evening, I sat in Richard's chair. Held the yellow legal pad. Crossed off each objective. Confession obtained. Intent documented. Daniel protected. The hunt was over. The trap had closed. Justice was coming. Outside, snow began to fall. Clean white that covered dirty streets. Made everything look new. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Arrests. The machinery of law grinding forward. But tonight, there was peace. The kind that comes after battles. After victories hard won. I had protected my family. My home. My dignity. The $5 coffee card still sat in its mug. A reminder of where this started. But it would end differently. With truth spoken. Justice served. Predators caged. The red ribbon was long gone. What remained was stronger. Sharper. What remained was me. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Sunday morning brought silence. Deep. Complete. The kind that follows storms. I woke to my phone buzzing. Detective Reeves. His voice was crisp. Professional. The sound of justice in motion. We have her, he said. Arrested an hour ago. Flight risk. Trying to leave the country. The words settled in my chest like stones finding bottom. Final. Heavy. Real. He would need my statement tomorrow. Formal documentation. The legal machinery grinding forward. I made coffee. Sat in Richard's chair. Watched snow cover the world outside. Clean white over dirty ground. My phone rang again. Daniel. His voice was hollow. Shaken. They arrested Vivian, he said. I know, I told him. Silence stretched between us. The weight of truth. Of consequences. Of choices made and prices paid. How long did you know? He asked. Since Christmas morning, I said. Since the $5 card and the forged papers. More silence. Deeper this time. I'm sorry, he said finally. The words cracked like ice under weight. I know, I told him. We'll fix what can be fixed. Monday morning arrived gray and efficient. Court buildings smell the same everywhere. Old paper and broken promises. I sat in Detective Reeves' office. Gave my statement. Signed documents. Became part of the official record. The charges were extensive. Forgery. Identity theft. Attempted grand larceny. Conspiracy. Wire fraud. Each charge carried years. Stacked together, they meant decades. A prosecutor explained the timeline. Arraignment. Discovery. Plea negotiations. The slow dance of justice. Vivian had hired an expensive attorney. Someone who specialized in financial crimes. In making guilt look complicated. But guilt was simple. Evidence was clear. Truth was sharp enough to cut through any defense. I also met with a federal agent. A quiet woman who took notes in precise handwriting. The FBI was interested. Financial crimes crossed state lines. More charges. Bigger penalties. A wider net for catching thieves. Tuesday brought journalists. Local news first. Then regional papers. The story had everything they loved. Elderly victim. Christmas betrayal. Family drama. I gave one interview. Brief. Factual. Let the evidence speak for itself. The reporter asked about Daniel. About family betrayal. About trust destroyed. My son was a victim too, I said. Desperation makes people vulnerable. I would not throw him to wolves. Not even wolves with cameras. Wednesday, I met with Nora again. We discussed civil recovery. Asset seizure. Making sure justice had teeth. Vivian owned property. Cars. Jewelry. The tools of her trade. Everything would be liquidated. Returned to victims. There were other victims. The investigation was spreading. Florida. Arizona. Nevada. A trail of elderly targets. Of Christmas mornings turned to nightmares. I was the one who fought back. The one who said no. The one who turned predator into prey. Thursday brought a different kind of visitor. Andrew Cole. Vivian's son. He sat in my living room. Drank coffee I offered. Looked like a man carrying stones. He was an attorney. Specialized in estate planning. Helped elderly clients protect their assets. The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. His mother had used his knowledge. Twisted his expertise. Made him an unwitting accomplice. I'm sorry, he said. The words sounded rehearsed. Practiced in mirrors. You didn't know, I told him. He shook his head. I should have known. Should have seen the signs. Guilt was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not now. Not with criminal charges spreading like wildfire. He would testify against her. His own mother. The woman who raised him. Fed him. Loved him in whatever way she could. Love and crime were different things. Justice didn't care about family bonds. Friday, I visited Daniel and Megan. They had sold the Mercedes. Paid down debts. Started the long climb back to honest ground. The children were quieter now. Confused by adult complications. By the absence of Aunt Vivian's sparkle. Megan made lunch. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. Simple food for complicated times. Daniel looked older. Worn down by shame and consequence. But also cleaner. Like someone who'd stopped lying. We need to talk about forgiveness, I said. He looked up from his untouched soup. Not mine to give, I continued. Yours to earn. From yourself. From your family. He nodded. Understanding without words. The work ahead would be long. Hard. Necessary. That weekend, I began putting my house in order. Literally. Metaphorically. I changed locks. Updated passwords. reviewed every document, every signature, every piece of paper that carried my name. Trust was a garden that needed tending. Weeds grew fast in neglected soil. I also started writing, not for lawyers or courts. For myself. The whole story, start to finish. Christmas morning to justice served. $5 cards to handcuffs. The arc of a hunt completed. Writing was how I processed. How I remembered. How I made sense of senseless things. Sunday evening, I called Richard's sister in Oregon. Told her the story. All of it. Eleanor, she said when I finished. You're stronger than any of us knew. Strength was a funny thing. Hidden until needed. Quiet until tested. I had been tested. By grief. By loneliness. By predators who mistook pain for weakness. The tests were over now. The grades were in. I had passed. Monday brought plea negotiations. Vivian's expensive lawyer wanted deals. Reduced charges. Minimum sentences. The prosecutor was unmoved. The evidence was overwhelming. The crimes were clear. Plea or trial. Either way, justice would be served. I preferred trial. Wanted everything spoken in open court. Wanted other elderly victims to see that fighting back was possible. But that decision wasn't mine. The prosecutor would choose. The system would decide. My job was finished. The hunt was over. The prey was caged. I had protected what mattered. My home. My family. My dignity. The $5 coffee card still sat on my counter. A reminder of where this began. But endings were different from beginnings. Sharper. Cleaner. More honest. What began with betrayal ended with justice. What began with weakness ended with strength. What began with a red ribbon ended with truth. I was no longer just Eleanor Hart. Widow. Victim. Target. I was Eleanor Hart. Hunter. Survivor. Victor. The difference was everything. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Spring arrived early that year. March brought green shoots through melting snow. Life returning to frozen ground. The trial was set for April. Vivian had refused the plea deal. Her lawyer promised reasonable doubt. Painted her as a misunderstood businesswoman. I wasn't surprised. Predators always believed their own lies. Right up until the cage door closed. The courthouse steps were slick with rain. I climbed them slowly, carefully, like walking toward history. Inside, the courtroom smelled like old wood and broken promises. 40 years of verdicts had soaked into the walls. I testified on the second day. Told my story, start to finish. Christmas morning to justice served. The prosecutor was thorough. Led me through evidence. Recordings. Documents. The paper trail of attempted theft. Vivian's lawyer tried to shake me. Suggested I was confused. Vindictive. A bitter old woman seeking revenge. I answered each question calmly. Clearly. Let the evidence speak for itself. The jury listened. 12 faces taking notes. Weighing truth against lies. Andrew Cole testified against his mother. His voice cracked twice. But he told the truth. All of it. Other victims testified too. An elderly man from Phoenix. A widow from Tampa. Stories that echoed mine. Christmas presents that cost everything. The pattern was clear. Consistent. Damning. Vivian took the stand in her own defense. Wore navy blue. Pearl earrings. The costume of respectability. She claimed misunderstanding. Said she was helping families. Providing services. Making everyone wealthy. Her lawyer painted me as the aggressor. The one who set traps. Who recorded conversations. Who refused reasonable offers. But recordings don't lie. Documents don't deceive. Evidence is what it is. The jury deliberated 6 hours. Came back with guilty on all counts. Sentencing was set for May. Vivian would wait in county jail. No bail for flight risks. I walked out of that courthouse different than I walked in. Not just vindicated, validated. The system had worked. Justice had been served. Truth had won. But winning felt quieter than I expected. Less celebration, more relief. April brought warmer weather. I planted flowers in Richard's memory garden. Tulips, daffodils, colors he loved. Daniel and Megan visited every Sunday. Brought the children. Made amends through presents. Through showing up. Trust was rebuilding. Slowly. Like bones healing after breaks. Stronger in the mended places. Megan found steady work at the hospital. Daniel took a second job. They were climbing out of debt. One payment at a time. The Mercedes was gone. Replaced by a used Honda. Practical. Honest. The kind of car that fit their real budget. Pride had been expensive. Humility was cheaper. May 15th. Sentencing day. I sat in the front row. Watched Vivian face consequences. The judge was thorough. Reviewed each charge. Each victim. Each dollar stolen or attempted. 22 years in federal prison. Restitution to all victims. Asset forfeiture complete. Vivian's face was stone. No emotion. No remorse. Just calculation about appeals. About angles still to play. Some people never learned. Never change. Never found the humanity buried under greed. I felt pity for her. Mixed with satisfaction. Justice was complete but hollow. No one really won when families shattered. That evening, I sat on my front porch. Watched the neighborhood breathe. Children playing. Dogs barking. Life continuing. The house held steady around me. 43 years of memories in every board. Every nail. Every room where love had lived. A car slowed in front of my house. Then passed. Just neighbors going home. Not predators hunting prey. I no longer watched every car. Every visitor. Every knock on the door. Fear had loosened its grip. Summer brought visitors. Old friends from the hospital. Neighbors who'd heard the story. People wanting to know how I'd fought back. I told them simple truths. Trust your instincts. Ask hard questions. Don't sign anything you don't understand. But mostly don't be afraid to fight. Even when you're outnumbered. Even when you're underestimated. Especially then. July brought a letter from Andrew Cole. He had moved to Seattle. Started over. Built a practice helping elderly clients protect themselves. His mother's crimes had become his mission. Guilt transformed into purpose. Shame channeled into service. Some good could come from any evil. If you looked hard enough. If you chose to find it. August brought my 70th birthday. Daniel and Megan threw a party. Small. Family only. The way I wanted it. We sat in my backyard. Ate cake under Richard's apple tree. Watched the children play. Listened to laughter fill empty spaces. The $5 coffee card was framed now. Hanging in my kitchen. A reminder of beginnings. Of journeys taken. Of strength discovered. September brought a check from the restitution fund. Money recovered from Vivian's assets. Justice with a $sign. I donated most of it. To programs that helped elderly victims. To organizations that fought financial abuse. Money had started this story. But money wouldn't finish it. October brought changing leaves. Red and gold against blue sky. The year turning toward winter again. But this winter would be different. I was different. Sharper. stronger, more aware of my own power. I had learned something that year. Something important about aging, about being underestimated, about being dismissed. The quiet ones are often the most dangerous. The invisible ones see everything. The forgotten ones remember it all. I was no longer quiet. No longer invisible. No longer forgotten. I was Eleanor Hart, 70 years old, widow, mother, grandmother, and hunter. The red ribbon was long gone. What remained was sharper, cleaner, more honest. What remained was me, all of me, the parts that bend and the parts that break, the parts that forgive and the parts that fight. Winter was coming again, but I was ready this time. Ready for whatever tried to take what was mine. The house stood solid around me. The clock ticked steady time. The garden waited for spring. And I waited too, not as prey, not as victim, not as someone to be pitied or robbed or forgotten. I waited as myself, complete, dangerous in my own quiet way, armed with truth and evidence and the knowledge that some fights are worth having. The neighborhood settled into evening darkness. Porch lights came on. Families went inside. The day ended like any other day. But I was not the same woman who had watched a Mercedes arrive on Christmas morning. Who had received a $5 card in a discount mug. Who had swallowed cracks in her chest. That woman had been prey. This woman was the hunter. The difference was everything.